you so much for joining me on the Creative Awakening Now podcast. I'm your host, David Matters, and I'm here to bring you stories, interviews, and insights relating to the topics of creativity, inspiration, and practice. My intention is to connect with other people who employ a heart-centered approach to the artistic process and to share this profoundly inspiring content with anyone who cares to hear it. I hope you enjoy. This is a dream, and a dream is never the same. My guests this week were Scott and Prema Sheerin. Scott is the musician and musical visionary behind the music on Healing Music Now. His deep interest in healing and the spiritual dimensions of music have led him to a long apprenticeship in learning the ways of music as prayer and music as medicine. He works as a traditional healer or marakame, initiated with the blessings of the Huichol ancestors. The music you will hear here is not Huichol. It is an expression of a lifetime of uncovering what spirit is wanting to express in a given moment through the voices that are available. This is music not anchored in any specific ethnic or geographical tradition. It speaks of the energy of fire and heart, the transformational and connective force in the world. This is music that invites the listener out of the dream of separation and into the dream of nature. Music that slows down the mind and connects us to the heart. Prema is also a healer, a life coach, and a teacher, and is also initiated into the marakame. She spent a lifetime learning from extraordinary teachers and discovering how to find meaning, fulfillment, joy, and peace in this world and mysterious ride that is life. She is here to share what she's learned with those of us who want to be with the wonder and the mystery of life, who want our work to hold meaning and fulfillment, who want to align our dreams with the dream of the divine and experience them unfolding with integrity and magic. She's maintained a healing practice for the last 25 years with training in the modalities of shamanic healing, shiatsu, plant medicine, and Reiki. She's also been a life and wellness coach in organizations and in private practice since 1989. She was the wellness director for a spiritual retreat site for 10 years, teaching and coaching staff and visitors on all aspects of well-being, physical, emotional, and spiritual. Having worked with thousands of clients, her delight only continues to grow as she witnesses people coming home to their heart, their own eternal source of wisdom, healing, and inspiration in the present moment. And oh boy, you guys are in for a treat with this one. This was just a really special interview. There's so much more to both of their bios that I didn't feel necessary to read because you'll learn so much about them. And you can also check it out on the website. But they have so much history with healing, and Scott with music, and just all kinds of great stuff. And they invited me up to their home to do this interview. And I had never met them before, but I've known of Scott's music and I've read about Prema's work, and they invited me up, and they were also doing a listening meditation with a little bit of a sound healing kind of thing too that Scott was going to host, and so I did the interview and hung out for that, and it was just really, really special. They both have such great energy and have a lot to share with people, so yeah, I think you guys are going to really enjoy this, and I hope you will check out everything that they have going on their websites, and I'll have the links posted up for that. But yeah, don't miss out because there's some really great stuff in here, really great content. We go into their medicine work with studying under the Huichol tradition, and also music and just all that good stuff. So yeah, I don't want to talk about it too much more. We'll let you listen to it. But as always, I hope you will check out everything that I have going on with Creative Awakening Now. Go in and check out my blog and sign up for my mailing list, get my free ebook. You can listen to my music for my band Life Like Water. We got a bunch of good stuff coming up with that, and yeah, I'm just feeling good. Things are rolling along nicely with this, and I feel so grateful to have so much inspiration through all this stuff, meeting these great people and making these great connections. It's been super fun, and I feel blessed. So yeah, if you want to help out the show, please go into iTunes, rate it, leave a review, do all that good stuff. Listen to it wherever you can. It's up there on a couple different places now, and I'll be sharing all that. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it, and I know you will. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you next time. one more thing. Be sure to stick around to the very end of this podcast and get to hear this awesome track of Scott playing some flute with some really great musicians. You're going to love it. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And thank you, Scott and Prema, for being here today. For allowing me to be here with you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, these are my favorite kind of podcasts when I get to drive up through the mountains on a beautiful day and sit out on a beautiful porch like this and listen to the birds and connect with people that I've never met and establish new relationships. And so I really appreciate opening your home to me and all that. And I'd love just to kind of get a little bit of background. Maybe each of you can take a turn with it, or collectively, however you want to work with it. But your work with music, especially Scott, and how that has evolved over the years, and then both of your work with the medicine work that you do around here, and however you want to take that. Just kind of start from the beginning.
Okay. Gosh, where is the beginning? That's a good thing.
You can make it up if you want.
I've been speaking to the music piece. I've been a musician all my life, and I'm in my 60s. And I guess about 30 years ago, I started studying holistic medicine, Chinese medicine. I became an acupuncturist. And then I studied something called plant spirit medicine. Started to do a bit of journey work, and something really opened up for me. And people started asking me to play music, play my flute for them, when I was doing acupuncture treatments. And I found out it worked really well as a tool to help people. And so life moved me down a road where I began to journey to Mexico to begin an apprenticeship, a shamanic apprenticeship, and with the Huichol people, the living tradition of the Vivetica people, as they call themselves. In the West, they're known as Huichols. And that Prema and I met actually on pilgrimage in that work. We both came to it separately and met at a gathering. And so that was about 20 years ago, 18, somewhere in that zone, years ago, that we met, and we both were apprentices at the same time. And then something like 8 or 10 years ago, we finished our apprenticeships and were initiated into something which we call traditional healing. We're traditional healers. It's just an English way of saying something that's very hard to say in our culture.
Yeah.
A lot of people call it shamanism, which is fine. It's just that's such a widely tossed around term that it almost has, it's almost lost its relevant meaning, Yeah. So the piece with music is, it just seems to be the way I'm wired. I feel the world through sound quite deeply. And some of the first work I did when I was being trained by the fire was to learn how to listen and learn how to pray with music. So it's been a really helpful aspect of life for me, just in learning and in getting to feel the world more like it really is and not the way we think it is. Yeah. And so the music that happens when I play a lot of times can be helpful to other people to, give them that experience. Something like that anyway.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I have a bit of an unusual life experience.
Perfect.
In as much as I spent the first part of my adult life, 18 years of it, living in an ashram. I began on that tradition when I was 21, and around about the same time I also had the awareness that that I am a healer, and around about that same time I also heard about this strange thing called life coaching. And I heard about that and I thought, yes, absolutely, that's what I'm here for. And so I spent 18 years living in an ashram, learning yoga and meditation and Vedic teachings, and at the same time learning different healing modalities, and eventually coming to do life coaching for many of the people in the ashram. And so then at a certain point I started getting quite sick myself, and my meditation master sent me to a shaman or traditional healer in the Wireka tradition, the Huichol tradition, because she knew of this man. And I started doing some healing with him, and before I knew it, I was told that part of my healing process would be to become a marakame, or a shaman in this tradition. So at that point, which was 18 years ago, I jumped out of the frying pan and into the fire of a shamanic apprenticeship, and as Scott described, about 10 years ago, graduated in that. And so I do healing work in that tradition, and I also do life coaching with people from all around the world, because I work by phone a lot. And I also teach workshops on various subjects like heart awareness and death and dying, transitions, and emotional wisdom.
Beautiful. It's an interesting to come by like Mexican shamanism by way of Vedic traditions to be recommended in that direction. That seems unlikely, but it's
and
great.
The fascinating thing about that is that while the trappings of each tradition are in some ways diametrically opposed, the essential teachings are the same. And that is that we need to connect to heart, to our heart and the heart that is alive in everyone and everything, and the wisdom and the guidance that comes from there.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that struck me from both of you is, you know, in your story and in your life transition and going through all these things, you both had the experience of having a sense, like a calling, or a sense of knowing about something in yourself. You know, with you just knew you were a healer or a teacher in that way, and music sounds largely for you. And a lot of this show with people that I interview and bring on, it's a lot about that, where it's about like knowing this thing in yourself and pursuing it with your heart, you know, and following it through. And that in itself is, I think, a creative act. And that's why I love having these kind of conversations, because it, you know, you have to, your life itself is the creative process, and you kind of got to go through it and see it through, and that's the practice, and that's where it's all connected. It seems to me through your stories, not to imply things for you, but I'd love it if maybe you guys would individually talk a little bit about how that apprenticeship kind of worked for you, and maybe pre-Huichol, maybe it was back when you were doing meditation stuff for you, but with the music and stuff, how that has informed your life, and like how that kind of, that process of learning from somebody informs you now, and you know, how you teach, you know, if you could talk about it.
Well, the core of the apprenticeship, you know, since you mentioned the apprenticeship, is learning how to rebalance inside your being, the relationship between the heart and the mind. And the mind being what gets focused on in our culture, in our upbringing, and what gets praised, and and the heart being something that's saved for, Valentine's Day and things like that. But and the way that you work with that balance is to develop an awareness of the divine presence in everything, in nature especially. And we are called to specific sacred sites and traditional sacred sites, and do a lot of preparation and do a pilgrimage to these places. Some of them are mountains or bodies of water or deserts and such. And it's done with very serious supervision and guidance, and there's austerities involved, and lots of fasting and various kinds of things like that. So, and there's a cycle every year, and it's over a number of years, a minimum of 6 years. And so you just learn how to slow down, and you just learn how to not make what your mind says is the most important thing. You just learn how to not necessarily believe that, and just go with what's happening and what you're being shown. And you're also learning to pray and how to speak to these divine presences, which is something that I think most of us weren't taught in our culture. So that whole practice that I just described in the briefest detail just then has a large effect on how the world starts to show up for you. And that's a funny thing, is people think the mystical world and the gods is someplace far away, but it's actually right here. It has to do a lot with what we focus on and what we're perceiving, So the apprenticeship is really just a doorway, and you reach that moment of initiation, which is where the ancestors in the tradition welcome you into I would call it a community, and and that's where everything really starts. And then it's a continuum, it's a river. It's basically you're becoming a drop in a stream. And the one thing I would say is that might be surprising to listeners. It was surprising to me when I realized it, because I had always been kind of charmed by the romance of shamanism, the Carlos Castaneda books and all these things. It's like personal power and this and that. And what I found is that that shamanism in this regard, in the tradition that I've been training in and working in, it's really about where you're called. It really, you said that word calling, and it's true. You're answering a calling. It's not something you can choose. It chooses you. And if you respond and you do things in a certain way, and then you're in, well, your life really isn't your own so much anymore. And your life becomes a life of service, and not to sound like Mother Teresa or something, but anything of benefit that can come from the sacrifice and work that we've done, which is very small, right? It might seem big to some people, but it really is nothing, right? And the benefit isn't really for us. It's how we might be able to share it with other people. You know, and sometimes it can just be by sitting and talking.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can be in healing sessions or teaching, or like through music, stuff like that. It's like honoring a calling and letting the circle complete back out into the world. And it's very mysterious.
Mm.
And sometimes it can really make you wonder.
Great word.
Yeah, yeah. But it is a dance.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that before you answer that, just to say, like, that mystery, you know, the wonder in it, and talking about following your calling and just knowing, and you know, it unfolds in such a natural way. And a lot of people I talk to, creatively and otherwise, especially if they're connected in a heart-centered kind of way, like you said, you're kind of like accepted among the ancestors, and the initiation is what brings you into the place of reciprocity, to where you're able to start giving back, like you said, service. But just to reiterate what you said, I think service is such an interesting word, because usually it's just about you just living that path and allowing other people to see through your actions, you know. And maybe it doesn't seem like much, but like you said, even just having this conversation and other people listening, I think that's a great service to go through it, and to let your life be an example of that, and your music or your healing work or whatever it is. And that is, in my mind, the key point that people miss out on in like the spiritual world, and especially in the shamanic world, because it's usually all about the adventure.
It's about, on some level, there's a lot of ego gratification that goes on in those circles. And of course you're never really going to escape that. You know, but it needs to be, awareness needs to be made around it. And it seems like the emphasis on how can I help someone else? What can I do to help? Or what can I do to, you know, like the pilgrimage thing, for example, is an amazing thing. And I think everybody feels it. I've noticed that people want to make offerings. They want to give to something greater. And they know, everybody knows instinctively, that some mountains are really, you know, carrying something, some streams, or, you know, and like learning, what do I have to give to a mountain? I mean, that really puts the mind really, it doesn't really have any business in that zone, right? So, you know, it comes back to that recalibrating the heart and the mind in the being, and, you know, slowing down the mind so that the voice of the heart can rise up and be heard. Because the heart, in the tradition of fire, in the Vedic tradition, and also in the Vedic tradition that Prema was part of, which I spent a little time with, you know, the heart is the divine inside of us, and it already knows how things are going to work out. It isn't concerned with personal gain and stuff like that, which is the job of the mind. And we need both, but we need them to be in balance.
Different emphasis, for sure.
Maybe
you could riff on that same question if you remember where the origins were. But
well, just to tag on to Scott's beautiful expression, is for me it's very much about cultivating relationship. First and foremost, our relationship with ourselves. You know, as Scott was saying, the relationship between heart and mind, and really learning how to lead with heart and have the mind be the amazing tool that it can be, rather than running the show, which it is doing for most of us most of the time because of our cultural orientation. And so really cultivating a relationship of a divine friendliness towards ourselves, you know, with the heart in the seat. And then cultivating our relationship with each other, you know, our human relationships, because there's nothing like other humans to reflect back to us how we need to learn and what where our growth is, and you know, also as human beings we're social beings, and so we need community. We thrive on community. We get our needs met better together than we do alone. And so really cultivating our capacity to be in relationship, and then expanding that relationship out to all of the other than human beings that are alive around us, relating to the tree beings, the cloud beings, the rock beings, the mountains, the lakes, and understanding that all of those are alive. And as Scott was saying, once we start to relate to them in that way, they start to speak to us. And so, you know, it really is deeply, it's about deep relationship. And one of the things that requires is emotional awareness and fluidity. Because one of the things that I notice about our culture is that we've polarized our emotions into positive ones that we should be feeling and negative ones that we shouldn't. You know, and you've been talking about creativity, and from where I sit, one of the things that we need for both creativity and right relationship is to be willing to feel a full range of human emotions and allow them to inform us about the situations that we find ourselves in, allow them to inform our creativity, allow them to guide us. And so, you know, we tend to push away our fear and sadness and anger as these bad emotions that we shouldn't feel. But actually, there's a whole amazing source of wisdom in those so-called negative emotions that we push away along with that. And so that's a very kind of a shamanic or tantric approach to our human experience that often isn't included in our dominant culture.
Yeah, I think it's so important to incorporate that wisdom. And I think that's what's so beautiful, that I'm so attracted to about traditional cultures who have practices and rituals and ceremonies that are geared towards that not just empowerment of the self, like you were saying, you know, it's not just about the, you know, I am this or I am now a stronger person because of it, but it's about relationships, like you said, cultivating that, and that's what makes you fully human, is to relate to the rest of the world. You know, like that's what makes us we feel so isolated and alone most of the time. Most of our modern culture does. I know my generation, you know, the opioid crisis and suicide and depression and all these things, and we feel so alone and we feel so scared and rejected from our peers and all these things. But the natural world is always there. We've lost our connection with it through, you know, call it what you will, you know, falling out.
Yeah. Well, one of my teachers and colleagues talks about the, you know, in all kinds of traditions talk about the illusion of separation that the mind engenders, that the world is according to what we're thinking, right? And he talks about the healing journey when we're talking about, you know, shamanism or, you know, certain holistic healing, let's say, is about, you know, leaving the dream of separation and stepping into the dream of nature. Like where you actually touch into a presence, and I'm going to call that heart, and the heart is not an individual havingness. Heart is actually the place where there is no individual. It's the place, and there's a term that we use called the common heart. It's like when you touch into heart, you're touching into the heart of everything. Bob Marley said that, I think, maybe too. One love, one heart, one something. But, I mean, that can't be overstated, that importance of relational energy, both in the healing process for people and, just learning how to live a good life. And it is the key to solving, or at least being with, in a good way, the incredible, what's the right word, catastrophe that we're in, environmentally, ecologically, socially, in the world. There's no way to technologically get out of this. We have to learn this. And it's gonna suck, right? It already sucks for so many people. And, we have to learn how to come into relationship with the world in such a way where we're making right exchange with everything.
That's right.
So says
Second
Smokey.
that.
Nice, Smokey.
That was perfect timing. Yeah, I think that's, I was having, and I practice largely in the tradition of Zen, is one of my main practices. And just this morning, having my weekly formal sitting with one of my teachers, and we had this exact conversation from the Zen perspective. And it has its own language, obviously, the whole Buddhist perspective versus indigenous wisdom from South America and Central America and all that, but it's all heart language. It's coming from that same kind of place usually, where in Zen we talk about non-duality, like non-separation of self and other. There is the ultimate understanding goes beyond words, because even words are a barrier between the experience, direct experience. And there's all kinds of things I could say about this topic, because it's so interesting, but I would really like to see if you guys could. So in the Zen tradition, people ask, how do I cultivate this understanding? Like, how do I, okay, that's all nice and good, I'd love to form a relationship with nature, and be closer and feel like I am one with them, but a lot of people don't know how to do it. And I would say that in the Zen tradition, our practice is Zazen. It's sitting meditation, and it is a whole range of things that you do to try and understand that relationship and to get over that separation. And I'm wondering if in the tradition that you study, practice, and teach, if you have techniques or practices that you could share with people that they could use to come to an understanding for themselves, beyond words. So, a practice.
Well, a few things come to mind for me, so I'll just throw out a couple of them. Okay. One is simply to go out in nature and spend time in nature and just simply look and listen and feel and focus on the living, pulsating world around us. There's nothing fancy there, but the divine beings, the other than human beings, are all there with this benevolent energy that is helping us to slow down the mind, become present in this moment, and be with the heart that Scott was describing, the common heart, the heart that's pulsating in everything. So that's one way. And then another way is, I was just talking about emotional wisdom a little while ago. And so another practice that can be a very helpful way of slowing down is to simply get present with, what am I feeling right now? Never mind what am I thinking or what it means that I'm feeling or why I'm feeling this way. No, what am I feeling in my body, in the form of physical sensations and particularly in the form of emotional sensations. And as we focus on those emotional sensations and let go of any of the narrative that goes along with them, why they're there or what they mean or what significance they have, those sensations are like a portal to the heart and to the divine feeling that's pulsating in everything. Because it doesn't matter what tradition you talk about in the world, whether it's the shamans who talk about joy as the nature of existence, or the Vedic tradition talks about bliss as the nature of existence, or the Sufis and the Christians talk about love. All of those things are feelings. They're all emotion. Like, the nature of the world is feeling. And if you can use whatever you're feeling right now at the very vibration of it as a portal into this underlying resonance of that pulsation of emotion that is like the ocean of emotion that the world is made up of. And that's a simple practice that we can do.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I would imagine that music's going to be part of your recommendation to some degree.
Yeah, not all. I mean, I don't want to sound. Yeah, I mean, that's how I do it. That's what works for me every morning. And but not all music is designed to have that effect. So it's not like a blanket statement about music. But I want to offer another really simple thing that can help promote the presence of heart and slow the mind. I mean, basically it's about slowing down the mind. That's really, that's always part of it. It's just in our culture anyway.
It's all spiritual traditions.
Yeah. And our culture is all about amplifying the speed of the mind. So it's like we've really got an uphill battle on this one. But it's actually deceptively simple. The mind is Mr. Complex. It wants everything to look super complex, because then it gives it a million jobs to do and you really need it. But actually, if you say, oh my God, this is so simple, then what's the mind going to do? Well, it'll figure something out. But so the simple thing is to go and build a fire in your backyard and sit down and spend some time by the fire by yourself or with people you love or with people that you want to get to know, and just sit there together and talk or not talk or play music or listen to the frogs, which is what we're going to do here tonight, hopefully. So sitting by the fire is actually a profound spiritual practice, and everybody, I think, in some ways kind of gets that, because it's hard to find someone that doesn't like to sit around a campfire.
Yeah.
Right?
You'd be hard pressed.
Yeah, and sometimes it's about beer or marshmallows or whatever, and that's all fine. Those are trappings. But fire in the Huichol tradition, and I think you could say probably, I'm going to make a broad, sweeping, unproven generalization, that every spiritual tradition, fire is in the center. And that fire is the energy of heart. Certainly is that in the Vedic tradition. So when we sit by the fire, we are reminded of, we are warmed by, and our darkness is lit by this incredible transformative presence, turning, the stored energy of the sun and the soil and the rains, that made this wood. It's being transformed into heat and light and ash, and producing this. What could you even say about what flames are like, Yeah. So it's a pretty amazing thing, if you want to even call it a thing. I mean, we have a name for grandfather fire in the Huichol language is known as Tatawari, and kind of translates as grandfather fire. And so when you just sit by a fire, or even have candles at dinner, or a candle on the windowsill when you're doing your dishes, or sitting and reflecting or praying or meditating with a candle, you're inviting that, you're kind of turning on the heart app.
Got to connect to the young folks out there.
Oh my God.
I love I love the conversation about the intangible when you try and put words to things that just can't have words to it. You just search for it. But metaphor is one of those things that has been used for a teaching method for all time since humans have existed. Metaphors and parables and storytelling, and there's a reason for that. And it's not just because it's entertaining. In the natural world, when people were connected to the natural world, and they literally, their survival depended on fire and rain and healthy earth and all these things. Like, they were like spirits to them. They are spirits, and they saw them like that. And today we don't see that because we're so far removed. We live in boxes, and fire's on demand whenever we want it. Rain or water's on demand, and that spirit is so dried up. But I've had this conversation before about how metaphors, especially about the natural world, there's a lot more to it than just a figure of speech or something, a way to relate in your mind. Like, oh, now I get it. It's more something primordial about the metaphor of fire. Like the experience of consuming this substance and turning it into another. The alchemy of it all, and we all deeply connect with it. That's my experience. And my opinion on it. Like you said, who doesn't like a fire? There's just something instinctual about it that we are drawn to, and it does teach in that way if you're silent enough to hear it.
And human people are the only peoples, like Prema was talking about, the rock people, the sky people, the frog people. The world we're just one of the peoples. That's part of our problem, is we think we are the deal and everything else is here for us, but no. And but we're the only peoples that have this kind of teacher-student relationship with fire. Fire was given to the human people as an antidote, and the traditions, the indigenous traditions, in a way you could say, were given along with fire as kind of like the server of the traditions, the way to connect the prayers with where they need to go and connect the people with each other, were given to people as a way to actually make it. Because humans didn't have much to go on to like make it in this world. Tools and spears and things like that. With the mind, we were given the mind to do that kind of thing, but that's not a way of really relating to the world. If you look at indigenous traditions, they did not spoil the bed, or what's the right metaphor here?
Poison the well.
They did not poison the well for, hundreds of thousands of years. Okay? They lived hard lives, and, there's many arguments you can make about this thing. But the truth of the matter is, they lived in some type of balanced exchange with the world around them, and gave back. And they knew just like everything was their relative, right? And part of what we try to understand every day in our own lives and help people with in conversation and in healing is to move into that again for all people, because that is the way forward. You know, that kind of relational energy, and fire is central to that. One of the aspects we're taught about fire is that fire is connection itself. So that's why one of the things why when you're sitting around a fire, you feel better, because you feel strangely connected to what? Well, who can say?
Generally connected to our heart.
Yeah.
When we sit around the fire.
Yeah, interesting that it's metaphorically connected to the heart in that way, through traditions.
And in Chinese medicine,
Yeah.
the element fire, the organ with the element fire is heart, for example. Which, by the way, the sound of it in that 5-element system is laughter. Sound of fire.
I did not know
So that's another good practice to help rebalance the mind and the heart, is remembering to have fun and laugh. Not take everything so seriously, because it is terribly serious. But there's a saying we have in our little medicine group, some things are too important to be taken seriously.
It's like the most simple but like profound kind of experience. No matter what the situation, if somebody gives laughter, and you're just drawn to it. There's no holding back from laughter if it strikes you in that way, And I've been given that advice by a number of people now, laughter as medicine, and I love it. I think it's amazing to have a light heart and to function from that space. Even very serious matters like what we're talking about right now, the sacred relationship with nature that we've lost over the generations is a very serious matter, and our world is declining, if you will. It's suffering, it's sick because of that, but that's our lamenting and sadness is not going to help that bond. I think that laughter is, like you said, building relationships and stuff is the medicine that's required. So it's this crazy dichotomy in a way. But
There's both. Both are required. Actually, we do need our sadness and lamenting, because that's the only way we realize the value of what we've lost and what we're losing. And we need to be able to move fluidly to laughter and joy as well. And so both those are really important.
quite true.
Yeah, I mean, one of the gifts of laughter is that it brings us into the present a little bit. Takes us out of just thinking and kind of, woo, here's this thing, and we're like, and that's another one of those key markers about, like we often talk about how, healing only can happen in the present moment. So part of when we're teaching or when doing music stuff or when we're doing healing sessions, it's like, how do you become present? How do you help a group of people to experience the present moment, or one person? Because the only way you can experience the present is with heart. And that's where the door opens for, healing to happen. The very mysterious thing of healing, like, really, I mean, ultimately it is completely mysterious.
Yes. Even something as simple as a scratch on your arm, how it heals, and that's mysterious. But when you talk about like emotional, spiritual healing, that's really something. But, I have an interesting question about that, because I 100% agree that music is one of those things that if you're open to it, can bring you into the present, and it can really open you up in ways like other things can't. And I find that music is like the other metaphors, or rather the other spirits that we spoke of, like the spirit of the fire or the spirit of water or whatever, and it has a very palpable spirit to it. And in a sense, I feel that music is very similar to that. Like, it has its own life force, and we kind of channel it. But while it can bring you in the present, it can also be a source of conflict for a lot of people, with creative people especially. Like, this is something I always am talking about in my blog posts and I'm writing about. It's like, we as artists, musicians, you know, we identify with what we do so much. We identify with our craft, and when we make music, we want it to be this thing, this way. You know, we want to be better at it. We always are striving to be better and more connected to, you know, play more notes, you know, play better melodies, you know, connect, you know more chord progressions, whatever it is. And when you sit down and you play from that kind of space, it's very, like, it can be jarring. It can almost be like, have the opposite effect, where it, you know, disharmony comes about because you're so in your head worrying about it. And I wonder if you can if you have a perspective on that, especially with the music you play. Like, me as a musician, the greatest times are when I'm just not thinking about it, not worrying about it. I'm just playing and like letting it come through, and it's hard to even get into that place. But if you get there, it's amazing, and you just feel it flow through you.
Yeah.
But if you're not there and you're like, you know, trying to write a new song or learn a new scale or whatever it is you're practicing, and it's not going very well, it's a source of frustration and self-loathing and judgment. You know,
Mm-hmm.
do you?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, to me, it's all about listening. So, like, if listening is the first rule of playing music, then that really solves a lot of the problems, because that means that you're not. So listening means that you're actually listening, that you're actually hearing what else is out there. That's what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And, you know, here we can hear the river down there, and there's some birds and some other birds and human sounds that we're making in these chairs, and the dog, and all that's really what's going on. But we're not really noticing that, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're a player and you're sitting down and I'm going to do this thing, are you listening? Not really, no.
Usually not.
No, you've got this agenda. And so when you make listening the heart of music, then allow yourself to feel, all right, and you know, here's one of those times when words are not so good. Mm-hmm. But like, you at a certain moment you just feel now, and you know, I play wind instruments, so I breathe into it, you know, and which is very natural because it's like singing or it's like speaking. So you know, and you kind of let that sound out into the other sound. So it's about, once again, it's about the relationships. First, you want to know, where am I? Who's here? And what can I give into this? And it can be active and have emotional, you know, boundaries. No, but you can have anger in it. It can be sad. It can be joy. You know, it can be anything. But it always has that listening quality in it. And when you get a group of people together doing something like that, that's pretty amazing. Yeah. You know. Yeah.
That's very helpful. That's one of those things that I personally struggle with all the time, but I think most musicians and artists and everything do, because we're so goal oriented and we're so, you know, future driven, where it's like the accomplishment, that the end point is where I'm shooting for. You know, I'm not trying to start anything here. I'm just trying to get there. And with, you know, I've had times where I've gone months where I'm mostly a songwriter, so my thing is like creating new melodies and things like that, and you know, pick up a guitar and it's just the same thing comes out, same thing, and I'm just stuck in it, and I get so frustrated, and I want to make something new, but I'm not allowing it, you know. And I had this recently where it was just like a couple months I was so frustrated, and then I went down to the creek with my daughter. She was splashing and playing in the creek. I had my guitar with me, and I was not even halfway thinking about what I was playing. It was just, noodling, doing the thing. And then all of a sudden, this melody came through, and I was like, within half a second, I knew this is it. This is what was meant to come through, And I channeled it through finally, and turned it into a full song. Yeah. And it's one of those things that's so mysterious. It's just, it has nothing to do with your skill level beyond what you've, obviously you got to cultivate to where you are now. But it's not about being a genius, or like, at least not for me. It's not about being a musical genius and like using theory to put it together. It's about like letting it come,
Yeah.
Speaking of letting it come and that beautiful things in that way, your flute's sitting right there.
Yeah.
Maybe you could keep me from talking anymore and say something that kind of comes from that space. And I'll try and adjust the microphone accordingly.
You're welcome.
Once again, the dog joined in, share its wisdom. Smokey. Yeah, that very perfectly illustrates while you're talking. I could like feel you listening. He's really powerful sitting next to you while you're playing that, and that's one of those things that isn't often taught in music classes, you know.
Yeah.
And I've really had the great fortune of meeting a couple amazing musicians lately that embodied that kind of playing, and to a degree. But it's rare, you know, and I feel like that's really where, maybe I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like that's where all the words we've been saying connect to music.
Yeah. It goes, well, an Indian sage is attributed to have said, music can go where other medicines cannot reach. And, you know, well, what is a medicine? I guess is one of the questions in a statement like that. But, you know, if it can break the illusion of the mind even for 2 seconds, and a person can feel reconnected with the source and the force of life, that's medicine, you know. And how it does that, I have no idea, really.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just glad to be in the room, you know, basically. And did you notice that during the playing, that the first night, that I'm not sure if I just call it might have been a cicada or a peeper, or you know, I'm not sure what to call it. It stopped since then. It just came on once, you know. And one of the things I teach, this thing called listening to the dream of nature. These classes where we sit and listen to nature and do guided listening, kind of developing listening awarenesses. And one of the things that time and time again comes up is when you're just listening, which in a way, that's all I was really doing. I was breathing and moving my fingers and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, really, like you said, it was listening.
Yeah.
And the awareness of everything around you knows that. It gets it. It feels it. And so the world responds. When you listen, the world responds. And, you know, the wind will rise, or, you know, these interesting synchronicities will happen, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a really nice sweet spot.
That's powerful, and really a great place to close it down. People are showing up now, and
Okay.
I don't want to keep you guys any longer than we already
That's okay.
have. But I greatly appreciate. Real quick, maybe we could just say, promote your website and the work you do for both of you.
Yeah.
Just
go ahead,
gonna
Prema.
give a mention of it.
Oh, yes, my website is premasheerin.com, and I do traditional healing, life coaching, and I teach workshops.
And you can find it on Facebook and all that. And
Yes, Facebook, I'm also Prema Sheerin.
cool. Yeah. I'll have the links up on my website too, but just wanted to say.
Great. My name is Scott Sheerin. My website is called healingmusicnow.com. There's lots of music and bad writing, and there's some podcasts that I've made over the years, and some videos, and no bad jokes, but we're still working on that.
And beautiful streaming music.
Yeah, there's
Very
probably about 50 hours of original music that I've made over the last 20 years, most of which would be really nice for healing, meditation, sleep kind of environments, you know, like it's all about slowing down. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important. If I could get one
What
more
about
thing.
Smokey's website?
Oh yeah, Smokey. Wait.
It's called .com.
Where can we get a hold of you? You had so much to say this podcast. I didn't ask in the show. I usually do. I mean, there was so much good stuff that came out. I just, it's maybe not even necessary. But I always like to ask people if they had one little nugget of wisdom, not necessarily from yourself or, to encapsulate what you do, but like, if anyone was listening to this and all the things were said, they're like, man, that makes sense. I connect with that. What was one last thing you could leave with people that would kind of sum up for both of you, if you have anything like that?
Be kind to yourself.
And keep it simple.
Lovely. That's perfect. Well, thank you both so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Inviting me up to your home today. And
Pleasure to have you.
yeah, it's great. Great conversation. Thank you, Smokey. Thank you for your wisdom.
Smokey can hit the pause button on your recorder.
Yeah. Thanks for everyone for listening, and we will catch you next time.